Welcome to UCC's Global Speaker Series on the theme of Farm to Fork, Equity, Finance and Sustainability in Global Food Supply. We're delighted to welcome everyone who's joining us here tonight on campus and all of you who are tuning in online from around the world. We'd especially like to thank Deloitte, who are very kindly sponsoring UCC's Global Speaker Series. The Global Speaker Series brings together experts from the alumni community with specialists from UCC to discuss topics of contemporary interest and to explore some of the opportunities and challenges facing our world today. This evening we welcome our excellent guest speakers, Hilary Barry and Dr Olive McCarthy, who will be introduced to you shortly by the chair of tonight's discussion, Dr Mary O'Shaughnessy, an award-winning researcher and lecturer in the area of rural sustainability, social innovation and rural social enterprise. Before handing over to Mary, I'm delighted to welcome Ruth Langley, Head of Client Programme and Executive Partnerships at Deloitte. Welcome, Ruth.
Thank you, Karen, and very nice to see everybody here, and a big hello to everybody online as well. I'm actually an alumni of UCC myself, so delighted to have the opportunity to come and join the campus. It's definitely gotten much bigger since I was here last. Needed a map almost to find my way here, but it's so nice to be here. And as it happens, I was just saying to Mary there earlier, my own eldest son has just started at college. It is UCD, so don't hold it against him. But seeing his excitement of starting college has really, I suppose, brought back so many happy memories for me in UCC. Our topic tonight on kind of investing in people to help them bring out their kind of potential and help them be as successful as possible is very much aligned to Deloitte and to our purpose, which is to make an impact that matters for our people, our clients and our community. And we actually have a world-class ambition to support 100 million people by 2030 by investing in partnerships and programs around the world with kind of leading educational organisations. So we really do believe that investing in education and skills will help lift people up and, I suppose, give them the success they deserve. And that's obviously key to what LadyAgri are doing as well. And, you know, we should be so grateful to people like Hilary who have, you know, dedicated their lives to helping other people to achieve that potential. And we have some, you know, amazing speakers here. I can't wait to hear what everybody has to say. So I'm going to stop talking. But I suppose I was just reflecting, you know, we had Kamala doing a great job at the debate earlier in the week, and I think with these ladies here as well too, it feels like the future is very bright. Go the women. So thank you all very much.
So thank you very much, Ruth. Do I need this to? Yeah, I can hear. So as we said, you're most welcome to our discussion tonight. As it says on the label, it's Farm to Fork, Equity, Finance and Sustainability. So I'm joined with two leading experts in all of those topics this evening, all very proud Cork women, I might add, and all alumni of University College Cork. So in the first case, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Hilary Barry. So Hilary, what can we say about Hilary? Hilary is the founder and the Secretary General of LadyAgri Impact Investment Hub. Since her first experience in Ghana in 1993, she has dedicated her career to the design and implementation of social impact programs across Africa, the Caribbean and the Pacific states. LadyAgri, as Hilary will go on to tell us a little bit more, takes a very holistic approach to supporting women throughout the agri-value chains from farm to fork, supporting women in cooperatives and SMEs to build climate-smart businesses that drive a sustainable food system. As I mentioned already, Hilary is a proud graduate of UCC. She's also a proud graduate of the Department of Food Business and Development, of which both Olive and I are academics within that department. And she is a convinced venture philanthropist. She's an advisor to the 2X Global Forum, which brings together the international, financial and banking community, committed to accelerating women's access to gender and climate-smart finance. She's also a member of the Council for Elevating the Voices of Women in Agriculture at the Ban Ki-moon Centre for Global Citizens. an advisor to the Italian Council for Agricultural Research and Economics, and the Research Centre for Agricultural Policies and Bioeconomy. Hilary leads the LadyAgri non-profit association. She has a multidisciplinary team of specialists, over 17 different nationalities, who are all very committed and invested in women and are active across 30 African and small island developing states. So I'm a little bit exhausted after just describing that, so I'm looking forward to our conversation. I'll move very quickly to our second speaker, who is my colleague, Dr Olive McCarthy. Olive is a senior lecturer in the Department of Food Business and Development at Cork University Business School. She's also a senior researcher, former director of the Centre for Cooperative Studies at UCC. She's the Programme Co-Director of the MSc in Sustainable Development, Agri-Food and Cooperatives, which in itself achieved great success as a winner of the 2024 Best Masters Award from the Education Awards in Ireland. She teaches and conducts research on cooperative businesses of all types, but is best known for her research on credit unions and, in more recent times, financial inclusion more specifically. Olive has published widely in many areas. The outputs of her research have had a direct and demonstrable impact on changing legislation, influencing government policy, and supporting the governance and practice of cooperatives at all types. She's a regular contributor to national and international media interviews, blogs, and podcasts, and recently won the UCC Research Communicator of the Year for 2023. So I give you full assurances we're in very good company this evening. So I'm going to begin this conversation, and I'm going to direct my first question to Hilary, which is maybe to tell us a little bit about your motivations in founding LadyAgri, and how did your UCC experience your career to date, Hilary?
Okay. Good evening, everybody. A bit emotional to be home in UCC University, and delighted to be here with you, Mary, and with you, Olive, and thanks so much, Karen, for organising this, and for Ruth for facilitating. So I suppose my first contact with Africa was when I was there in 1993 to 1994. My father worked for ESB Ireland, and he was there on a contract, and so joined him, and basically opened up my horizons. And since then, I basically carry Africa around my neck, because once Africa takes your heart, you don't actually get to leave it. Came back, did European studies here in UCC to get a sensible job in Brussels, which was my dad's ambition. And then when the choice came round to me, I chose to do the Masters in Cooperatives, Food Marketing and Rural Development, which was what it was called at that stage. And once I went in, I can say that I was perhaps a little bit confused in how those three different issues could actually link together, and maybe it took me about 20 years to actually link them back together, and now they make perfect sense. And basically, LadyAgri, our three pillars, are built on the fundamentals which I learned here in UCC in these halls. And what I also learned from working in Africa, that if we really want to look at sustainability, if we really want to work on impact, then we need to target women. And any of the work I've done, women come back with threefold the impact when they do get the attention and support. So that's basically how it all came together. I'm summarising basically a long career. So,
thank you, Hilary. And as Hilary mentioned, Hilary's a graduate of a programme, a Masters that we ran a number of years ago, which is in the area of rural development, cooperatives, and food marketing. And that programme has gone through a number of iterations, both as demand changes, as global challenges faces. And the most recent iteration of the programme, Olive is a co-director with another colleague of ours in food business and development. So I'd like to maybe ask you a few questions, Olive. So first of all, an opportunity to tell people about this award-winning Masters, and secondly, to tell us a little bit about what you see as the main learning outcomes and the skills that are provided to the students in terms of how this improves their ability to maybe meet some of the global challenges we're currently facing.
Thank you, Mary, and hello everybody, and welcome back, Hilary. Great to see you back with us again. This programme was set up in 1991, actually, here in UCC, and I'm sure you'll recognise that was far before my time. But I don't mind admitting that I did get involved in the programme in the late 1990s, so have been around a little bit of time. The programme was originally set up by Professor Michael Ward and Professor Dennis Lucy, who I think in conversation before we've kind of agreed were somewhat ahead of their time in terms of seeing the interconnections between kind of the agri-food space, sustainability and sustainable development, and also kind of cooperatives as a potential solution or an approach to tackling some of those key issues. And you'll remember, Mary, that Michael used to always call it the three legs of the stool.
Yes.
And he very much saw them as a very integrated whole. And it's great that Hilary, it might have taken 20 years, but it's great that, that those three things came together. So what we have is a programme that doesn't translate well into Latin on Conferring Day. It's quite long. But it's quite an interesting and unique programme, I think. And I know we have three people who've just finished the programme sitting down the back there who can probably testify to the programme a lot better than I can, because I haven't done the programme and they have. So I always defer to students and graduates of the programme, because they have more of the insight or of the breadth of the programme. But really what we have is a whole set of modules. It's a kind of a wide range of modules, but really they're all underpinned by sustainability in every sense. So in terms of economic, social, environmental sustainability. And I suppose often when we think about environmental sustainability, the approach can be quite technical or kind of science-based. And what we try to do really is, I suppose, take a little bit of a step back, focus on the agency of producers, of consumers, and looking, I suppose, at how systems and policy can support them in achieving, various kinds of sustainability. So in terms of producers, we will look at things like, getting a fair price for their product, getting access to markets, particularly agency for farmers and producers in decisions around what to produce, when to produce it, and produce that's appropriate and suitable to the soil and so on. And thinking about quality, nutrition, not just quantity. In terms of consumers, then we're looking again at fair price for consumers. Again, quality, nutrition are all really important things, food waste, etc. And then we also look at kind of solidarity between consumers and producers and bringing them closer together in the supply chain, and maybe pushing out some of those intermediaries that aren't necessary along the food supply chain. So students end up with a very wide range of knowledge from very kind of different but complementary perspectives. And one big emphasis of the programme really is on practice and getting exposure to what's actually happening on the ground, if you pardon the pun, but what's really happening in industry, what are the real issues affecting people on a day-to-day basis. So we're not sitting in our ivory towers talking about theory, we're actually very much engaged in practice, and we bring a lot of visiting speakers into the classroom who talk about what's happening, what's real for them right now. Our assessment is also very applied to what's happening in real life as well, and encouraging our students to engage with the real issues of the day. So I think they hopefully come out at the end of it with a very kind of balanced, I suppose, exposure to the ideas, and a very practical and applied and kind of job ready, I suppose. And yes, we won the Best Masters programme, and I think that's a reflection of the quality of the teaching right across the programme and the innovative approach we have in terms of that practical and applied nature.
Great, Olive, thank you very much. So both Hilary and I are graduates of the programme, so we've now established Olive as the youngest person up here. But one of the things that when we were studying that programme, we didn't really focus in on, different types of farmers or female agri-entrepreneurship, or we dealt with farming, we dealt with rural, we dealt with different types of the rural economy. So what I'd like to ask you, Hilary, is a little bit in terms of, because of the extensive work that you're doing in Africa, what do you see as the challenges facing agri-entrepreneurial females, women within the whole supply chain? And why focus on that? What you see as those challenges?
Right, okay. So I think, it's in the name in terms of LadyAgri. Our issue was that we wanted to give women visibility for the actual work that they do. when it's often funny when you look at sustainability magazines, whether it be from banks or corporates or whatnot, women are always on the front page. However, when you actually look at the specific support that they receive, they're often not invited to any training on good agricultural practices, on circular economy, on managing food waste, on managing logistics. And then there's a whole bundle of hurdles when we want women to have access to finance. And then the type of finance which LadyAgri concentrates on is agri-finance. Because often the quick solution was said, well, women have access to microfinance. But microfinance in Africa can cost up to between 18 and 37 to 50% a year interest. And also to actually get access to that finance, which you need if you need to buy fertilizer, seed, if you want to actually put storage in place, if you want to get any access to climate smart technologies, you're not losing 70% of your crop. This is the reality at the moment. If you want to get access because the land isn't in your name, because you don't have a car in your name, because the house is certainly not in your name, you have no chance of actually getting access to formal finance. So what inspired us was not by looking at women and putting them in the miserable category, but by perhaps looking at the potential and all of what they have been ingenious enough to put in place, which is village savings groups, pooling their resources, working together. And all of those are very much linked to, I suppose, the cooperative principles, which we saw and studied with Michael Ward many moons ago and Bob Briscoe, in looking at the power of that collective. And women are good and better at working as a collective. So in 2016, I had actually put a pen to paper and said, okay, I've arrived at this stage in my career. I am surrounded with 27 others in my network who also seem to have the same mindset. Let's build LadyAgri, which is also built on cooperative principles. So the members of LadyAgri are a member of the cooperative. And we brought together our different expertise in finance, legal, agronomy, and brought that together to bring answers to women, which are our focus. I'll give you more time now to ask questions.
Yeah, okay. Well, it leads me on nicely to Olive, because Olive, one of your expertise in research is around credit unions, around financial inclusion, around microfinancing. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about how cooperatives, how microfinance, why are they good instruments or good tools for the attainment of some of the, the goals that Hilary has talked about in terms of inclusion and financial inclusion?
I think Hilary has very nicely kind of showed the fundamental need for credit that's out there, but not just credit for credit's sake. It's credit that's very specifically tailored to the needs of women or to low income or whoever that happens to be, rather than a kind of a very conventional approach that the cooperatives and the credit unions and the savings and credit cooperatives that we see in many African countries, for example, are very much, as you said, about kind of pooling resources, pooling the savings, pooling what people have, and using that in such a great way to actually support one another. And there was a great book written, and I'm sure you'll remember it from having studied it as part of the programme, but in 1996, published by Richard Douthwaite, called Short Circuit. And there's a very interesting chapter in that called Banking on Ourselves. And he opens he was based in Mayo, he was an Englishman based in Mayo, and the opening paragraph talks about a mobile bank driving into the community, collecting all the savings and doing all the financial transactions for everybody in the community, and then closing across the shutters and driving out of the community. And he painted a really interesting image of all of the kind of financial resources of that community being driven away and not working locally for that community. Yeah. So it always stayed with me over all of these years as, how, the importance of keeping resources that are in local communities, in that local community, working for that local community. So I suppose having that access to credit allows access to the means of production, exactly as you said, Hilary, access to seeds and animals and that upfront kind of investment that's needed for machinery, etc. And what we see is that a lot of the research will show that there is a very clear link between food security and access to credit. Okay. And there's also a clear link between a lack of food security and a lack of access to credit, if you know what I mean. So, but it has to be, I suppose, as we said, credit that's designed specifically for the needs of the people who are going to use it. And we mustn't forget, and I often remind students of this, that credit is debt as well. So what we don't want to do is end up giving inappropriate and landing people in inappropriate debt. So it has to be very specifically designed, and it does need to be regulated. It needs to have proper procedures in place, and there needs to be an element of consumer protection, I suppose, to it as well. But it also has to be affordable, exactly as you said, Hilary. And but as you said, the design is just really important. I suppose having access to credit also allows for that diversification and spreading of risk for women who may wish to, move away from a reliance on a cash crop, for example, and do lots of different things that are more appropriate and getting access to markets. So there really is and has been and continues to be, and there is a growing, credit union sector in many developing economies, and while we would know them as credit unions in our context, they would also be called savings and credit cooperatives, and they have a really important role to play in terms of mobilising those local resources that are there to support other people within that local community. So it really is a fundamental concept, and it's why it's something that's it's in the title of our programme for a reason, because we think it's so important.
Great, thanks Olive. So Hilary, you mentioned that you wrote this piece in 2016. You were surrounded by like-minded people, but obviously there's an institutional environment that you're operating in. There's governments. There's so what do you see as maybe the role of government or the role of policy to be able to support some of the objectives of LadyAgri and other organisations like yourself that are trying to promote female empowerment, promote agri-entrepreneurship, to overcome some of the blockages that you see? Do you have maybe some reflection on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I suppose we work very closely. So as civil society, we chose to be like an NGO, civil society group, so as to keep that agility, so that we have no problem knocking on the door of the European Commission or the Minister of Agriculture in Cameroon or the Minister of Trade in Cote d'Ivoire. Often it's quite hard to say no to a group of women like us who don't take no for an answer. But when I come back to the issue of policy, if you look at the Malabo Declaration in 2015, there was a commitment from all of the African Union members, there's 54 countries, to commit 10% of their annual budget to investment in agriculture. None of them have reached that. So far. And if we look at an area for growth, economic growth, for jobs for young people, for jobs for women, I don't see another alternative to agriculture. So there is an obligation for countries to step up a notch now and to actually align their policy and bring their policy up to date with the international commitments that they make to the Sustainable Development Goals, whether it be net zero in terms of poverty, in terms of ensuring health and education and inclusive growth and sustainable production as well. So that commitment has to be there. And if you look at, I suppose, why I make the link to Ireland, if I look at the difference between 1973 and we joined the European Union and now, Ireland has been built on agriculture as well as our foreign direct investment policy. But it's also built on the education and the investment that we made. We have to have vocational training in place. I'm always very proud to quote Tagask and how we have 27 local antennas around our country which are available to our farmers and cooperatives in terms of research, in terms of innovation, and that what is lacking in Africa is that support. So there has to be that kind of forward looking from governments to say this is an area which has growth potential. We need to feed our population. We need to reduce our import bill. And even now it's been more topical because with the war in Ukraine, with COVID, the countries in Africa have realised their import bill. 20% of maize coming into Côte d'Ivoire came from Ukraine and from Russia. That was cut down. And then there was a whole different mindset in saying, well, what do we do to substitute that so we have flour in our bakeries and we have bread? And then they started looking at women-dominated crops, which is cassava, which is also an alternative to flour. So there's been a shift in that, where the international crisis has an impact on the government, and the government suddenly then updates its policy for economic reasons to say, this is a sector worth investing in. Women are the group who were invisible up until now, and here is something where economically they're feeling it in their pockets, so they are adjusting their policy to that. Okay. So definitely what we try and do is make our work topical and realistic, and making sure that they can see the win-win by investing in agriculture and what they can gain from that for their population and food security.
Yeah. And just before I go to Olive, I mean, what kind of investment is there in climate smart agriculture? You know, what is the support that's available for the type of agri-entrepreneur that you work with?
Okay. So there's a lot of talk about climate smart investment at the moment, and green finance. What I see is missing is the real finance where you can actually pay for storage so that you're not losing again your crops. What we have done at LadyAgri's sake is that we have brought a lot of climate smart technology and equipment into the communities and grassroots. We've built 10 solar dryers now for women, where with those solar dryers they've actually brought down their food loss by 73%. So I think any solutions that need to be given need to be very concrete. We need to move very fast. The climate change is accelerating, and this is going to become a massive issue. And then we will have climate migration, and we will have people leaving their homes, and we see that in the Pacific already, how they are being affected. So it's something we need to take very seriously. So one of our lobbies as well is with the financial sector. We're not afraid to go to the banks. This is why I'm a member of the 2X forum, which says we are advising the banking community, the World Bank, the bilateral development banks, who lend money to Africa, who lend money through the local banks and the local microfinance institutes, and it's a business. It's a money-making business. So we lobby hard to say, if you are putting this money in place, are you sure that this money is accessible to your target group, who can then actually put climate change, risk mitigation things in place? And there we're really pushing that women and youth are really top of the priority list and need to get access to that finance to make the change.
Great, thank you, Hilary. So maybe to build on that question, because I'll go back to your original comment about the extension services that Teagasc provide. Yeah. So we do have some of our own graduates, I think Olive highlighted them at the back, who spent time with you on placement, because one of the key features of the master's programme is that there is a practical element to the students going on placement and getting a first-hand experience of working in the sector that they're learning about in the classroom. So we have some of our own graduates who spent time, and I know just from an earlier conversation, some of the work that they were doing, which was on just training around cooperatives. So maybe the next question I have for Olive is a little bit maybe back to the programme, Olive, but in terms of the kind of skills that students come out with, which allow them engage in the kind of extension services that Hilary has alluded to, and other aspects of kind of other challenges that you see out there for this area of activity that the programme is addressing.
Yeah, so I think there's, I suppose, a lot of key issues that the programme addresses in terms of trying to support, as I said, producers and consumers, I suppose, in almost shortening food chains. And what the programme does, I suppose, initially is tries to help students to understand and to get a grasp of some of those kinds of burning issues or sticky problems that producers and consumers face. around the lack of market power, I suppose, and the need to get the best possible price for their produce. And understanding, I suppose, that many farmers, particularly small farmers in very remote rural communities, may be working very much in isolation. And I suppose having an appreciation for the fact that a cooperative can help to bring these small producers together in different ways, and using the kind of economies and efficiencies of scale that brings, but also the social kind of sustainability aspects of supporting one another. So I think the programme helps to kind of understand what the unique conditions of both producers and consumers are, and what the needs are, and how that cooperative model can help and support them in meeting those kinds of needs. Also, I suppose, processing their product, bringing value add to the product, so that again they can increase the income to the producer. So in terms of skills, a very fundamental part of the programme is research, and engaging in research that's designed by the student and is a topic and a country and an issue that's of interest to that particular student as well, and we very much work closely with them. So they gain the skills of, I suppose, the inquiring mind, and learning where to look for sources of information. But we also do a lot of work on communication across the programme. So in terms of, say, presentations that they would have to do of the research that they've done, group work, and really kind of learning to work in groups where, like any group in any situation, there's always, dynamics there that have to be dealt with. So those skills, I suppose, are fine-tuned over the course of the programme. They also do a full module on project management, because it's so important that you're going out into the field with, that kind of mindset, that it's organised, it has targets, etc. And they do some really interesting applied assessment on that as well, working with community and voluntary groups. And then, of course, the placement element of it. So while they do research while they're on placement, but they get that practical exposure in a workplace, a dynamic workplace where there's a different challenge on the table every day of the week, and you have to be reactive, and you have to be solutions focused and be ready to react on any given day to any given particular issue or topic. You don't have a deadline in the end of the semester to think about it and then submit a piece of considered work on it. Sometimes it's that quick reaction. So the placement, I think, is really important part of our programme, and really equips our students then to get stuck in as soon as they finish the programme, back into industry and the kinds of organisations that Hilary is working with.
Thank you, Olive. So Hilary might just tell us a little bit about, she's been nominated for a very prestigious award, and she's going to the UN next week. So you can maybe say a little bit about that in terms of the recognition of what you're achieving, but also a question to both Olive and to Hilary in terms of what progress are we making towards meeting the UN goals? It's constantly in terms of our discourse. You're teaching it in class. You're living it, and you are now going to the UN next week. So maybe tell us a little bit about that nomination that you are up for, but also in terms of how what's your own sense of whether or not those UN goals were closer to reaching.
I suppose I'll speak first about the work aspect of it. So when I was working in Senegal, I was working for the UN. I was 24, 25, and my job was to work in launching the campaign on the Millennium Development Goals, and across 16 countries in West Africa. And I spent 6 months with the UN, and I left the UN. Because I found those 6 months we were working on basically the baseline of where the countries were in terms of their development, and I just found that there was a distance between where the UN was at and what we were actually seeing in terms of the ground. So it took off those rosy-eyed glasses that perhaps I had coming out of college with my master's, and I was going to change the world, Mary. I was convinced of it. And then when you actually get out into the real work, and you see the challenges, and you see the challenges in terms of the granular issues and the constraints, and you can actually get quite despondent at that stage. But what I did is I accepted a job with the Belgian embassy, and it was working on their development programs, and their development programs seemed very concrete. They were working on health, they were working on water, and they were working on women empowerment. And I suppose the grains of LadyAgri goes back to that. And then I project onto where I'm at now. And I was nominated by the World Food Prize Foundation as one of the world top agri-food pioneers for women empowerment. About 2 weeks ago, yes. I learned that news. But I keep my feet firmly on the ground. When I actually got that, it's obviously extremely flattering. But it kind of said, all of those nights during COVID, when I thought we had to put the key under the mat with regards to LadyAgri, which we had just launched a year before COVID, those dark nights of the soul, as they say, I said it was worth it. It was worth to keep going. But not so much as of the prize, because I accept this prize not just on my own behalf, but of all of the people who believed in LadyAgri, like yourselves, Mary, like yourselves, Olive. And what it also is, it's a prize for the women that we support, because they are the ones that face the challenges every day in very difficult situations. In rural Africa, it's still dark at 5:30 in the evenings, if we could imagine that. They're still walking 5 miles for water in 2024. They're still trying to balance those economics of a cash crop, which is subject to the Chicago prices, which are decided way, way far away, and the food issues and the necessities of their families. So this prize goes to them, and I will humbly accept it on their behalf in the end of October. Next week we're going to the UN. We're going to raise the voices and raise the visibility of the women that we work with, of their potential. We will be with President Mary Robinson next Friday, who is a strong, strong lobbyist on climate action and who has dedicated her life to women empowerment, starting with Manona Heron, which has spurred on Irish women so much. So it's very humbling to be at her side. I think at this stage we need to be very realistic in terms of the sustainable development goals. Governments cannot do it on their own. They are also facing the crisis, whether it has been COVID, whether it has been, which has led on to economic crisis, the different conflicts that we are seeing at the moment. There seems to be lots of fires burning, and where do we put our priorities? So I don't think the answer is just with government. Private sector is also understanding that they need to have a very strong, sustainable business model in place. If you're depending on cocoa, you're depending on those small farmers having access to finance. Cocoa prices have gone up to almost $10,000 a tonne this year due to climate change, because there is so little cocoa being produced in the northern bigger countries like Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, and there is a drop there. So I do believe that we need to keep multilateralism, but I also think that all of those who have held the funds for so long need to be held accountable for impact. And we need to be measured on our tangible impact of our work, whether it's in our businesses, whether it's in the projects we manage, whether it's in terms of who we are educating and the education that we are giving. Those leaving UCC are the people who need to be coming up with solutions. So we need to make sure that our courses are relevant, that they are armed and tools to go out and to help and find those solutions in terms of the climate change and sustainability.
Thank you very much, Hilary. And Olive, the same question to yourself.
Yeah, except for the award bit, because
Yeah.
that's definitely only Hilary's award. But I suppose because I'm quite interested in financial inclusion, and I think that financial services really underpin all of the SDGs. If people don't have access to services and to finance, it's going to be very hard to make progress on SDGs. It's good to see that microfinance is called out in SDG 1.4 as one of the tools for alleviating poverty. But if we talk about financial inclusion for a second, what does it even mean? And the way we measure it, I mean, really what it means is having access to financial services and being able to use them. But the way we measure it, unfortunately, is not particularly advanced or scientific, I would say, but we measure it in terms of bank account ownership. So if you have a bank account, you are considered to be financially included. And this, unfortunately, is the only measure we've managed to agree on in terms of what it means to be financially included. It's not perfect, but at least it's an indicator. And the OECD measures the extent to which people have a bank account. And I was just looking at some figures this morning. Between 2011 and 2021, globally, bank account ownership has increased from 51% to 76%. So as a general indicator, you know, and we can only read a certain amount into that, we can see that hopefully, you know, financial inclusion is increasing. If we look to more kind of developing economies, those figures are a lot lower. So it's increased from 40% to 60%, but at least the trajectory is upwards. I know you're very interested in Côte d'Ivoire, so I just had a quick squint this morning just to see what the situation was in Côte d'Ivoire. And it really highlights a lot of why you're doing the work that you're doing, Hilary. 51% of adults in Côte d'Ivoire are considered to be financially included, but only 37% of women. So you can see that women are disproportionately affected in terms of financial exclusion. So I think it's interesting just to see that there has been progress. I think we can take it that there has been progress. It's something we, as you know, lucky enough that we don't even have to think about this in terms of, you know, we've just take our own bank account ownership for granted. As I said, it's not a great measure because we don't know to what extent you might have a bank account, but you may not actually use it. You may not know how to use it. You may not have, you know, the financial capability or the literacy to use it. So it's a very raw, I would say, a raw kind of a measure that's being used. But one thing that gives me a lot of hope, and it's really, I suppose, when microfinance started off, it was in most of the emphasis was on microcredit. And then after, you know, 10, 20 years, they started to realize actually we need to support people with savings as well, because savings is what builds resilience and resilience against risk and loss in the household. So there was a fundamental shift kind of to include savings as part of the credit and to use savings to finance the credit. So we're moving to a much more kind of sustainable approach. But in more recent years, I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, something that gives me a lot of hope in terms of achieving sustainable development goals, but particularly maybe number one, is a kind of a new focus on microinsurance, or what's sometimes called inclusive insurance. So it's enabling people on, you know, very low income to access insurance to safeguard themselves against loss of income, you know, poor health, etc. And we're starting to see more and more of this insurance emerging, but designed in a way that is accessible for people. So for example, if you were able to save a little bit of money, that the interest you earn on your savings pays the insurance premium. If you take out a loan, say a microcredit loan, that there's a little bit added on to that loan that helps to pay for the insurance. And we know that there's a direct relationship between poverty and, you know, exacerbated poverty, I suppose, and the poverty trap and lack of insurance. So to see this really positive development, I mean, it's not widespread. There's huge work to be done. There's a lot of progress to be made. But to see this emerging in more and more countries now, to me, it gives me a lot of hope that, you know, we can help to break some of those cycles of poverty by people having more of that resilience built into how they do their business through kind of a microfinance initiatives. So to me, microfinance is fundamental really to sustainable development goals, and I think, well, I said there's a lot of work yet to be done. We are seeing some progress on those very kind of raw figures as such, but they're moving in the right direction.
Great, thank you very much, Olive, for that. So we're drawing to a conclusion. I can see Karen's eye over there, and I'm going to give the last word to Hilary, because one of the things, Hilary, that Olive has mentioned, the countries that you're working in, and something that someone asked me at lunchtime today when I said we were having this tonight is like, what African countries do you pick, or how do you find yourselves working in certain African countries? And the last one maybe is just your own reflection, because you mentioned that you throughout that time in COVID, and when you were putting the key under the mat because you were wondering where's the future is this, there must have been something in your journey that made you decide this is really worth doing, this is worth, I'm going to stick at this. So, and this is impact, So what was that moment that you remember that will always be the kind of, this is the reason I keep going, doing what I'm doing?
Yes. So I think if we all remember back to COVID at the beginning was, there was a sense that this was a European issue. It hadn't hit Africa yet. And the previous year we had financed ourselves 14 different missions to Africa from our own savings and funds. So I suppose we had started LadyAgri very much as women entrepreneurs. No one was going to put money on us. We were definitely the dark horse, and we were definitely put in, I'm going to laugh at this, the pink category. Now very proud to be wearing pink today, and we were put into kind of the crazy women mode. So we had done those missions ourselves. Now this was built on a career working in Africa, so our networks were there. So that's the link to the different countries where we work. So we have 234 experts across Africa that we have worked with, trained up ourselves. They went from junior trainers to now master trainers and coaches, and they are very much there with their finger on the pulse within the different agricultural value chains that we work, whether it be fruit, veg, coffee, cocoa, fish, poultry, whatnot. So they're the experts as such in terms of that. What kept us going was the WhatsApp calls that started coming in at 11 o'clock at night from the women that we had worked with the previous year. And they rang us, and said, keep going. And so that's why we kept going. We didn't have a choice, and I suppose there was a stubbornness then, a good Cork stubbornness, which said, we're not going to give up. Yes. I think my colleagues said at that stage, we can definitely see the rebel Irish coming out and kind of believing that this was a mission which was bigger than us. Mm-hmm. This was bigger than us. We had basically walked out of fully paid jobs and salaries and whatnot to start LadyAgri. So there was a determination there to actually go out there. And then when we're out there now, and when we can see that the women cooperatives that we work with have increased their income 7-fold after working with us for 6 months, I said, we must be doing something right.
Yes.
And certainly we're so honoured to be working alongside them, because really we're privileged to be with them. So that's what keeps us going.
Great. Okay, Hilary. Well, that's a good point to conclude with. So I would like you to join with me in thanking both Olive and Hilary. I think this was a really interesting conversation. We've seen a lot of discussion about kind of what we teach in the class, what happens in practice, and also what a good program can lead to, as exemplified in Hilary here in the middle. So thank you very much for your attention this evening, and thank you both.